everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I am joined by the wonderful Taryn Hatcher and the dynamic Joe Fordyce. We are getting closer and closer to Flyers training camp coming up here in September. Rookie camp will kick things off around mid-month, and then the big camp will follow. Plenty of competition to talk about, so we figured we would get right into our top training camp storylines, our best position battles that we're going to keep an eye on. And then we're also going to talk about the Flyers Hall of Fame. 6 finalists for a new induction member this season. So a lot of fun stuff to talk about the past and what's coming up this season, and also a lot to talk about with training camp right around the corner. So let's get into it. Taryn Hatcher, I will start with you. What training camp position battle is going to catch your eye the most?
I feel like for me it would be along the wings, but like no specific to, because I think when you look at kind of down the middle, I feel like there's a good foundation that feels like it'll settle in a kind of predictable way down the middle for the Flyers. And I would be very surprised if the Flyers defensive pairs are not what we think they are. There's certainly possibility for things to move around, but I would be really curious if it wasn't Ellis and Provy and Ristolainen and Sanheim and, Braun and Yandle. So I think along the wings, just in general, is where I'm the most interested. It kind of goes back to when we were talking about our top 6 battles, and we're talking about, where's Joel going to fall? Where's JVR going to land into things? It's not 2 players for one position per se. But I will be really, really interested to see how some of these positioning, like some of these combinations with the wing players pan out, because, we've seen a lot of like the default combinations with the Flyers go back to being the same thing. And when I say default line combinations, I'm mainly talking about Coots, G, and Jake together. And that security blanket is obviously gone now. And I think a lot of people slide Cam Atkinson right in there. And I think that would be, I would love to see what that looks like. And I think that could be great for the Flyers. But I would be interested to see how certain things come along. I actually ran into Joel, Kevin Hayes, and Justin Braun as I was going for a power walk yesterday. And like Joel looks like he's big. I mean, he truly does. He looks bigger. He looks more like an adult in person than I remember him looking like, I guess, almost 2 years ago and a year and a half ago now. I'm very curious to see where he falls into things. But yeah, just along the outsides, I'll be very curious to see how things shake out.
Yeah, there really is so much competition in that bottom 6, especially on the wings. That should be super intriguing to watch. Joe, how about you? What's going to have your eye?
Yeah, I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit here, and I'm going to do so because of the way the transactions came together. I'm going to look at that 4th line center because they signed Nate Thompson earlier in the free agency period, which to me said we liked what we had in that guy during the season that ended with the bubble playoffs, and we want him to come back. And then down the line, when we thought they were done, all of a sudden they signed Derek Brassard, who has way more of a pedigree in this league than Nate Thompson does. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested to see how that plays out, because it kind of seems like they signed Nate Thompson and said, okay, he's going to be our 4th line center. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute. No, nobody signed Derek Brassard. I want him.
Yeah. So
now what? And I think both those guys will be super motivated. We know Brassard has the history with Alain Vigneault. So, that'll be interesting to me. I personally think it needs to be Brassard. To me, it's a no-brainer. But again, Nate Thompson was the first guy they signed. Of those 2 guys, he was the first that they signed. And clearly the team has a history with him, a very recent history with him. Whereas Brassard's is a little bit removed in a few teams down the line with Alain Vigneault. So that intrigues me. And, I will say the other thing I'm looking forward to is I think we're going to get a super motivated Cam York, because I believe there was probably a point during this offseason where he thought he was going to be in the starting lineup and he was going to make the opening day roster. And I'm not saying that's definitely not going to happen, but we've talked about it on this podcast and other podcasts, and Taryn just briefly alluded to it there. It seems like the 6 defensemen are almost set in stone, and it would take a He-Man-like effort, not to date myself, but for York to crack into that top 6. And I just don't think he's the kind of guy who's going to make the team as an extra defenseman, because a guy at his age, you want him to play. And if he's not going to play here, I think he needs to play with the Phantoms. So I think you're going to get a super motivated / maybe a little bit angry Cam York. So I'm kind of interested to see what that looks like during training camp as well.
Go ahead.
Jordan, once you do yours, I have an honorable mention, and I don't know what yours is. You guys, we genuinely don't try to pander and pick different stuff before this. So I'm curious to see what yours is, but I have an honorable mention, kind of 2-player battle that I think will be interesting to watch.
No, I like it. No, let's get into it. So
I'm getting saucy.
That's called a tease in TV terms.
Yeah. That's a tease.
Yeah, you guys want to peek behind the curtain? That's a tease, folks. That's why they pay me the bucks in general.
In general.
Go ahead, Jordan. Sorry.
No, you're all good. I love the point about Cam York. I found it very interesting at development camp where someone brought up Keith Yandle, and he said when they signed Keith Yandle, I didn't think, well, dang, there goes my spot. And he said it word for word. If a defenseman blocks a shot in the wrong way, that's 8 or 9 games right there that the team needs to fill. I think Cam York's a smart kid, but I have a feeling that came directly from general manager Chuck Fletcher to Cam York was, hey, we're signing Keith Yandle, but be ready. A block shot means a spot is open. I think that was probably told to Cam York. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a kid really pushing hard. He's naturally a confident kid that's going to want to prove and open eyes. Taryn, for me, before you get into your sleeper, I'm going to go along the wings, but I'm going to go specifically Nicholas Aube-Kubel and Wade Allison. If that might have been your...
I knew it. That was going to be my honorable mention. I knew as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, I should have said that. And I knew you were going to pick it because you're smarter than me.
No, that's not true. But as you were saying wings, I was like, man, she might have mine on the nose. But you did go very general, which is I totally agree with too. I think there's on all the...
I just don't know where anyone's going to end up. No. I really don't.
I mean, the Flyers even purposely said multiple times about Derek Brassard that, hey, he can play the wing a little bit too. They said that when they signed him, that he can play wing as well. And I think it shows you they're going to maneuver guys.
Same thing with Lawton, NG. And there's just so many people where you're like, if they really, and AV will, if they really don't like what they're looking at, they could essentially flip this thing like a Rubik's Cube, and all of a sudden all the squares look different. So, but no, Wade Allison and Nick Aube-Kubel, I think, is the head-to-head.
Yes. That
I'm sure the team would never acknowledge it, and I have this on no authority whatsoever. But if there was ever a spot competition, we've got 2 guys for this one spot, I think it's, do we keep Nick Aube-Kubel in this lineup, or will he become our potential healthy scratch kind of 4th liner, and we put Wade in instead and get what he can give to this lineup? I totally agree with you on that, Jordan.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about that, Jordan, that I would add, you couldn't have ended the season with those 2 particular players on opposite ends of the spectrum than you did.
Yeah.
Wade Allison, it was sky high energy every night, sort of a kid who came in, made an impact, and every time you heard the guy talk, you couldn't help but be like, oh, I love this guy. This is exactly the breath of fresh air this team needs. Yeah. Meanwhile, you had Nicholas Aube-Kubel taking penalties that were leading to devastating goals in games that the Flyers needed to win. So you had one guy on the top of the spectrum and the other guy on the bottom, and now they're kind of going to meet in a, not a literal sense, but a head-to-head in camp.
Yeah.
And that is super intriguing. It's a super intriguing thing, and I think Aube-Kubel has some work to do in training camp here to kind of erase some of the mental scarring he might have done to this coaching staff during the latter portion of last season.
Yeah, I think that truly will be the truest competition in camp in terms of head-to-head. I would have maybe said something different if the Flyers didn't sign Derek Brassard. I maybe would have thought it would have been Morgan Frost pushing a Nate Thompson or someone to be a bottom six center. But once they got Derek Brassard, that bumped someone out. And now it's going to really come down. One of the fourth or third line wing spots will come down to Wade Allison, Nicholas Aube-Kubel. I think Wade Allison made Nicholas Aube-Kubel's seat much hotter last season when he came up for that audition, played 14 games, stayed stuck. He opened eyes. He scored goals. He did everything I think the fan base and organization wanted to see. So that to me is the truest battle. But Taryn, please continue with that too.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing that will interest me though, and I think we talked about this with Joel, or maybe I was just talking to my friends about like players that come out of college in general. It will be interesting to see how Wade fared. Like here, I totally agree with what both of you said in terms of the trajectory of Wade and Nick were like diagonals going in the opposite direction. And Wade's stock was really high for a brief period of time, and Nick Aube-Kubel's stock kind of would go back and forth and then kind of had a precipitous decline towards the end of the season. The interesting thing will be when it is night in and night out, and it's a longer season than some of these guys are used to playing, because even last year was more comparable to like a college season than it was a true NHL season. That's when you find, or at least from what I've been told, because I don't like to speak as if I am a hockey player, but I do talk to quite a few of them. From what I've been told from the guys who come out of college is that even if you leave after 4 years and you leave a grown man, for quite a few people, there is that learning curve physically of like, the certain month hits when normally your postseason would begin and you get to take a mental break. And all of a sudden that's your most important part of your NHL regular season as you push towards a playoff. And that can be tough for guys. And I think Wade has a tremendous head on his shoulders from what I've heard from everyone and talking to him. But I will be interested to see, we got to see Wade burn bright for a short period of time. The question will be, how does he hold up over a long period of time? And if he, we haven't had to see him really negotiate like difficult down games. And he doesn't seem like the type that gets high on the highs or low on the lows. But a lot of guys can see like that type. And then last year they did. So I think that's the TBD. And that's part of the appeal of keeping Nick Aube-Kubel around is like, yes, he does do weird stuff sometimes, but, Nick's used to being a grinder type of player now. And he's become accustomed to being up and down and in and out. And I'm sure at some point even if Wade really tremendously outplays Nick and earns a spot, I would venture so far as to say there may be a night when you need a guy who maybe has more experience with like just getting through a game to maybe get in there. That's not really the way I wanted to word that. I think there may be a time where you need him to almost be like a relief pitcher within the course of the season is essentially the best way I can put it. Because and Nick could come in and be a totally different guy than he was last year, because let's face it, like a lot of guys were mentally, physically not what we were used to seeing. And Nick has a little bit more of a habitual history of doing some of those things. So it's not like it was totally off for him. But you'd hope if he really wants to be a consistent NHL level player that he cleaned it up this offseason. So we'll see. But I do think that there's necessity for both of them. But I think Wade's stock seems like it's coming in higher than Nick's does.
Yeah, I feel like he's going into camp with an inside track at a role. Not to say Nicholas Aube-Kubel isn't, but I also think we shouldn't forget Aube-Kubel and count him out. He does have the longer track record of doing it at the pro level compared to Wade Allison. He's shown the Flyers more in a larger sample size. He was really good in 2019-20, and he did it in a pretty nice sample size. And it's just a matter of, can he do it consistently? But he does the things the Flyers like in terms of playing north-south, forecheck. He was one of their best forecheckers in 2019-20, the year they had a really good season. And he did it even in the round robin. He did it in the playoffs. So it's just a matter of doing it consistently, staying out of the box, and and showing he can help on a night-to-night basis.
I don't want to sell the house before it's finished here, but I've been talking to Zach Hill, the wonderful public relations guy from the Flyers from last week when our usual go-to guy, Joe, is on vacation, a much earned vacation. And I wanted to talk to Wade last week, and then Joel signed and we got Joel instead. It's looking like I may talk to Wade tomorrow. So while we're talking about him, we may have a one-on-one that we could either look for it on the website or we could slip in this podcast at some point. But if you want an idea of where Wade's mind is at, I will pick his brain tomorrow for everyone. So submit your questions, do my job for me if you'd like.
Yes. Tweet at Taryn Hatcher, get the questions in. That's going to be awesome. We can't wait
just
for that.
tweet me something nice. Just say something nice.
Yeah, or something nice.
Ask her how people do that on Twitter? Do people do that?
No, they don't. That's why I'm asking them to do it now. No,
Yeah.
They never do. They never do.
Joe,
How did this broad get her job? No.
The Philly accent.
yes, South Philly.
I'm going to do a full Flyers pregame live and just
You should. I'd watch.
Mayor of Easttown pregame live.
Yeah.
You just don't even know. All right? You don't even know. Somebody's going to get mad at me, but I'm like, I'm from here. My parents talk like that.
It's the rite of passage. When you're from here, you're allowed to do the accent.
Yeah.
100%.
When I work with Ben Davis, mine gets thicker on Philly stuff. Ben Davis makes my accent like I've become from Delco, like that.
And Ben has a great sampling of all the different accents from this area.
Yeah.
Ben is the man. And yeah, he is true Delco. He's the best with that.
Yeah.
Taryn and Joe, I will ask you, anything that intrigues you on defense? I'll start with Joe. Defensively, any competitions there? Obviously, I really do think we know the 6 going into opening night, but I feel like we could see them move a little bit.
Well, I just mentioned earlier what kind of drive Cam York will come into camp with. But I am interested to see what Keith Yandle looks like if he's playing what we think third pair even strength, but quarterbacking one of the top 2 power play units with this mix of forwards and so forth. I'm very intrigued to see what that looks like. I'm interested to see his skating, how all this looks. And I want to see what Rasmus Ristolainen is. And I don't mean what he is like looking at his video with Buffalo. I want to see what he is playing with Travis Sanheim. And, we've talked about this several times. Sanheim needs to take ownership of that spot. So that's another thing I really, really want to see. And it needs to start in training camp. He needs to show up as a veteran and not a young guy and take ownership of that spot on the second pair.
Yeah, a ton of competition there. I really feel like we could see Justin Braun and Rasmus Ristolainen maybe fluctuate from the second and third, maybe even Travis Sanheim. Taryn, what do you think?
I don't love Justin Braun and Travis Sanheim. I won't lie.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just don't. I would like, it's less of a competition. I would like to see how Rasmus Ristolainen and Travis Sanheim play next to each other, if that is in fact the pair. I mean, who knows what they're going to do. But it seems like that's how it would fit. I'm curious to see how that would work out. And I'm also interested to see how Travis approaches almost his style of play this season, because his plus minus really took a blow quite often last year. And I remember when Scott Gordon was up and he was the interim coach, and we were talking about the development of Travis that year, 2018, 2019. And he was kind of the one day I was just asking him about a bunch of the guys that he had down in Lehigh. And he was saying, it's so interesting because with Travis, he always wanted to go. He always wanted to pinch. He always wanted to get involved in the offense. And because he could at juniors, and we kind of had to pull him back from that. And I think it was something he took a lot of pride in doing, but we kind of had to say to him, like, you have to figure out how to put restraints on that in order to play at the NHL level. And once you have that internal compass for when to go, when not to go, and what that looks like, then you can get involved as much as you'd like. And I do think with how athletic and how well both Phil and Travis normally skated that allowed him to do so at certain times. And then when they didn't play well, both of them, I thought, looked a little bit lost in conjunction to each other, if that makes sense. So I'm very curious to see how Rasmus and Travis gel and what parts of Travis's game that brings out. And like Joe said, I don't think any of us really even know like what player Rasmus or Celine will be not on Buffalo, because Buffalo has such an impact on how an individual player looks. I mean, look at Jeff Skinner. Like, so there's lots of people you could talk about that had the Buffalo impact. But I think with the right pairing, Travis could contribute so much, and he has before. So I'm curious to see how that, but it's not really a battle. It's just, I want to see that. And I think that's why I'm not such a fan of Justin Braun maybe playing alongside Travis. I don't know. It just, yeah. I would like to see Travis next to like another threat, and then see what that does to other teams, really.
No, I like that. And I think it really will be really intriguing who is playing with who. Maybe not who's going to be in the lineup, because I think we have a good idea, but who's playing with who. And before we shift gears to Flyers Hall of Fame, I will say I think Rasmus Celine, while it seems like he's being debated a lot among Flyers fans, I have a feeling old school Flyers fans are really going to like this guy. And I think he's here just in time in the sense that fans are going to be back for what we know right now. Fans will be back in full force. And here's a guy that plays with a nastiness. He likes to be annoying, and I think fans are going to embrace that. I feel like we didn't maybe see that as much last season, something we could see this year. And when we asked Sean Couturier about Rasmus Celine, and he even smiled and said, yeah, he was definitely a guy you had to keep your head up while you're on the ice. I have a feeling in the Flyers locker room, they were probably talking a lot about Ristolainen being an annoying player to play against last year.
How do you think Travis, I'm curious from both of you or Jordan, or if we want to move on, but what do you guys see that pair looking like, Jordan?
The Sanheim-Ristolainen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are the two guys the Flyers envision being together on the second pair, but I don't think they're going to hesitate to switch it up. It is an interesting dynamic because you have an offensive-minded guy that's a real fluid skater that needs to prove himself more probably in the defensive zone, and then you have a Ristolainen who's like, yeah, he wants to be a pain in the butt and, you know, is kind of a polarizing figure because we really don't know who he is yet. Is he the guy in Buffalo? So I will be fascinated to watch it, but I think that's the pair they're envisioning. Joe, what about you?
Yeah, I think, and you know, I'm trying to beat a dead horse, but Sanheim, I think they are expecting, and given the contract they gave him, they're expecting Sanheim to take a step up here this season over previous seasons. And I think all the talk we're doing about how Sanheim fits with Ristolainen is based on what we've seen from Sanheim up to this point. And I think that needs to be better. And, you know, if it's not, then I think you could see some of that movement that you talked about. Because, you know, you can't have your second pair defenseman putting up a -6. And, you know, and I'm not trying to single out just one game, because there were many games where those guys, he and Phil Myers, struggled last year. That one at the Garden sticks out. There's no way it doesn't stick out. They were both -6 on the night. But Sanheim needs to take a step here. And I think that is going to make or break that second pair. And I don't think Ristolainen is the make or break on the second pair. I think it's all about Sanheim and taking that next step into a guy who's in the middle of his career as opposed to the beginning of it. And, you know, I'm interested to see that as well.
Flyers Talk is brought to you by Great Railing. Stop into Great Railing for the highest quality and lowest prices on all your railing, decking, and fencing needs. Well, let's get into the Flyers Hall of Fame chatter. It was very cool. On Tuesday, the team announced the 6 finalists for what will be a new inducted member this season into the Flyers Hall of Fame. We haven't seen it since 2016 when Jimmy Watson went in. Here are the 6 real quick: Simone Gagne, Paul Holmgren, Bob Kelly, Lou Nolan, Mark Recchi, and Rick Tokic. Our very own Taryn Hatcher is on the voting committee, which is awesome that has to be a real honor. So Taryn, I'll start with you. Just how cool is that for you to be on the voting committee? And these are 6 people with impressive resumes.
Yeah, they like send you a ballot and they ask you like, first choice, second choice, so on and so forth. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, who am I to sit here and say where Paul Holmgren or Simone Gagne belongs on this list? Like, lifelong Flyers fan and, very much wanted to be involved in covering this team, like since I was an intern at Comcast Sportsnet, like, so incredibly flattered, but I was also just like, dude, how am I even supposed to do this? And then, it's very cool, but it's interesting because like you talk about Mark Recchi, and then for me, it's always like Mark Recchi, the guy who like breaks 100 points in a season more than like anyone else in the history of the franchise, right? And Simone Gagne for me will forever be, he'll forever be attached to that memory of the win over Boston in 2010 in the playoffs. Like that goal will always be, that call of that Simone Gagne goal will be burnt into my memory for the rest of my life. And I have such a wonderful relationship with Lou Noel. Like it's so interesting because, and Joe knows this, Rick Tocchet is my favorite former Flyer to interview. I think he's most people's favorite former, like he is just everything. He embodies like the ideal Flyer, I think, for a lot of people. So yeah, I don't mean to like just, screw the whole segment that as we're trying to get into like the legacy of each of these players, but it's very cool. It's also just like what am I even supposed to do here? So I also, just a forewarning to everybody here, like I'm not really supposed to talk about like who I voted for or whatever. So I can't really give like partial insight. I can only speak from my heart on this particular topic. So
no, well, Taryn, I know
don't yell at me because I didn't ask to be part of the committee. They sent me the email and it's like, no pressure, but here you go. So
no, that's why I tried to tee you up without actually asking, hey, Taryn, tell us. So
no. I'm not supposed to talk about it.
No.
It's just like, also, I'm sort of like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, as you should. Awesome. And I know you hold all 6 in high regard, 100%. Joe is like my Flyers go-to historian. I swear, like anytime I need some history or some facts on the organization's past, like Joe is my go-to guy. I knew he grew up with so many of these guys in terms of like watching them when he was younger. Joe, I know Rick Tocchet you're close with. I know you've seen a lot of Simone Gagne. Just what do you think of these finalists?
Well, I'll start with Tocchet, and I'll say while the other guys, a lot of them are stat-driven, I think Rick Tocchet's legacy is very intangible in this town. If you were to say to me, what is the portrait of a Flyer, what it means to be a Flyer, I see Rick Tocchet with a mullet running in training camp. The video we've used so many times on our shows of Rick Tocchet training with the Flyers in training camp from the 80s. That guy, his face all banged up and just, that guy was a guy that was willing to go out and do whatever the team needed. If that was score a goal, if that was fight somebody, if that was cause a ruckus, it didn't matter what it was. He was the guy to go to. And I always remember when I first learned about hockey, I started by having my dad tell me that Rick Tocchet was awesome. And then I later, of course, got to work with Rick Tocchet, and I know him very well. And so to me, he's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And he's clearly a fan favorite in Philadelphia. We talked to him last year, and he said one of his regrets is that one of the cups that he won was not with the Flyers. I mean, think about that. He's won cups as a player and a coach with Pittsburgh, and he said that he would trade one of those cups with Pittsburgh to have won one with the Flyers and seen what that was like here. So, I mean, that's a Hall of Fame statement right there to me.
Yeah.
As far as the other guys go, it seems it's puzzling to me. I would say Tocchet, Recchi, and Gagne should already be in the Flyers Hall of Fame. Mark Recchi, Taryn alluded to it. He has the best point season in Flyers history, 123 points for a team that didn't make the playoffs. That's pretty impressive. Then he was here when the Eric Lindros era started. And when I say the Lindros era, I mean pre-Legion of Doom. He was on the Crazy Eights line with Recchi, Lindros, and Brent Fedek. A blast from the past was the Crazy Eights line. So, and then, of course, he came back and had another great season in the 99-2000 year. Of course, that was the season that they won the 5 overtime game in the series against Pittsburgh in the playoffs. And that was a team there. Of course, that season ended with Eric Lindros' last game as a Flyer when he got hit by Scott Stevens. But I've talked over the years to so many guys that were part of that team. I should mention, Rick Tocchet also was on his second stint as a Flyer for that team. And to a man, those guys all thought they were winning the Stanley Cup that year. Yeah. I believe there's probably more untold stories about that year with this Flyers team than maybe any team in history. So those, and Simon Gagne, also part of that team. Yeah. And, so to me, those two guys are no-brainer. And then Simon Gagne, Taryn alluded to 2010. And to me, it's not just about that goal. It's about that series against Boston totally changed when Simon Gagne came back from injury. That became a different Flyers team with him on the ice. And, of course, he scores one of the biggest goals in Flyers history. And he is more than one of those. He forced Game 7 against Tampa in 2004 in one of the better moments in, it's Wells Fargo Center now, but at that point, I believe it was Wachovia Center when he scored that goal against Tampa. So, I mean, he is back-to-back 40-goal seasons, including a 47-goal season, his career high. And, he just a dynamic offensive player and a player that was on the Flyers before he was 20 years old. And there's not that many guys you can say that about. So to me, those three all stand out as guys who it's long overdue that their names end up on a banner up there. And I should mention too, Mark Recchi is a Hockey Hall of Famer.
Yes.
So I think it would only be right for him to be in the Flyers Hall of Fame as well. So, I know he had so much success with other teams. I mean, it seemed like the second he ended up on a roster, that team automatically won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, Boston, Carolina. I mean, the list goes on and on. And, of course, now he's an assistant with the New Jersey Devils and was kind enough to join us on Flyers pregame live last year and take shots at Jonesy. Also a Hall of Fame worthy thing.
Yeah.
On Mark Recchi's resume.
I have two things I want to follow up real quick on. First, I said that Recchi had more. So Bobby Clarke had 3 100-plus point seasons as a Flyer. Recchi had 2. His third was with Pittsburgh. I just want to correct myself before somebody gets mad. And second, Joe, you are remiss that when you talked about Rick Tocchet, you did not mention part of your affinity for Rick Tocchet is the giant spread of food that he would bring in when he worked on Flyers pre- and post-game live.
Absolutely.
Because every time we talk about how much we love Rick Tocchet, and Joe and I do talk about our appreciation of Rick quite often because he's just the best guy to interview. He's so down to earth. He genuinely loves, you talk about the intangibles, he loves Philly. He loves the Jersey Shore. Every time we're on, how's the weather down at the shore? I'm going to head back as soon as the season. Like, people talk about like Jason Kelsey now and like going to the OD and stuff like that. I feel like Rick was one of the OG, like, I am going to ingrain myself in the culture here, which people might say that I'm overlooking lots of culture here, and that would be fair. But like amongst Flyers fans, especially, where it's like, we're in the city and we're at the games and we're cheering hard and we're going to this bar, we're doing this and whatever. And in the summer, you can catch me down in Sea Isle and I'll be on the beach. Like, that's part of Rick. And he would show up and do pregame live before I was there. But Joe always talks about the giant spread and like always got soup or something, right, Joe?
Oh, yeah. Like and him and Michael and Al would have I forget what soup it was, but it was always about soup. And there was this a dinner spread he would have delivered there as far as the eye could see. And he would show up when he first got there with boxes of Dunkin' Donuts for everybody to start the day and then the dinner. So, I mean,
So if Joe is voting, Rick Tocchet would be number one on that ballot.
And let's not forget last year when he was coaching Arizona, we had him on as a mystery guest, and he did the interview in his car as he had just left taking his COVID test in Arizona, the daily COVID test. So, I mean, the guy would just do anything, and you know, it's almost, he's one of those guys where you mentioned Philadelphia, and you know,
lights up. He lights up.
It's almost like a father's like little daughter asking for, you know, a piece of candy or to buy them anything. It's you know,
he adores Philadelphia. Like he really does adore the city. It's very fun. He like, and I'm sure he's talked about it. There's an article about it. I think you can look it up, about how he talks about how he was raised and how much it prepared him for living here and how at home he felt here. But you can tell if someone didn't tell you that Rick Tocchet was not from like this area, this region of the country, you would think that he was. Like, you'd think that he grew up and he, like, you know, I would say that he went to like Malvern, but I don't think he would. I think he would have went to like a public school in the area and, you know, paid his dues and had like, because he has a ton of respect for people and he gets a ton of respect back here. And it's just part of who he is. And this has that, like, again, I'm just talking about how much I enjoy Rick. This also does not reflect upon how I am voting, but I cannot say enough good things about Rick Tocchet as a human being. So for what it's worth.
And I mean, in his coaching, even his coaching after he worked with us on pre and post game live, when he was an assistant with Pittsburgh and then the head coach with Arizona, anytime I would text him and ask, hey, can we do a one-on-one with you for our pregame show? It was always, okay, well, I'll do it at this time. Meet him outside the locker room, always there. Great answers, great insight, and just an awesome, awesome guy. And Taryn, one follow-up point to your Mark Recchi point. He had the 200-point seasons, the third 100-point season with Pittsburgh, but then in his second tenure with the Flyers, he comes back and has a 91-point season in his second stint with the Flyers. Just an unbelievable player. And
it's like his goals created stats too are just like wild. They're wild. He's so responsible for so many points. Yeah. It's wild.
Incredible.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah, and I'll never get tired of going to Mark Recchi's hockey reference page. Like, you have to really scroll. It's that impressive, and your mind is blown seeing what
I just had it up because I was double checking because I knew he was with Pittsburgh for the one.
Yeah.
Oh no, I just clicked on Bobby by accident. But it's like his first 100-point season, he was 22 years old, 113 points at 22. And his 91-point season, he was 31. It's just like and I feel like, not to disrespect Mark Recchi because you just can't, but being a 31-year-old player in 1999-2000 is not like being a 31-year-old now. Like, their body took so much more abuse with so much less sports science and so much less of like all of the kind of care and preciousness that, you know, all of the extra additives that get added into, it's not just the sport anymore. It's the sports science that goes with it. Yeah. And he was still putting up 91 points at 31. The fact that he put up 100, I got to double check this because every time I say it, I'm like, someone's going to yell at me because it's wrong. 22 years old, 1990, 1991 was his 113-point season, 73 assists that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you keep going down that hockey reference page, you'll notice he played for Pittsburgh 4 different times.
Yeah.
4 different times. Middle of the season trades, and then he comes back. And then after all that, he played for the Flyers twice. I mentioned Pittsburgh, four different stints with Pittsburgh, Montreal for a number of years. And then at the end of his career, he goes to Boston for 3 years. He's on the Boston team that against the Flyers that blew the 3-0 lead, as we talked about with the Gagne goal. And then the next season, he wins a Stanley Cup with Boston. Yeah. And that's his last year. I mean, the guy was just a winner. Winning followed Mark Recchi his entire career. And, you know, unfortunately, the Flyers were one of the teams that had him that didn't win a Stanley Cup, which is a shorter list than the teams that had him that won one.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously he won 3 Stanley Cups, all with 3 different teams. Rick Tocchet, 3-time champion, all with Pittsburgh, 2 as an assistant, 1 as a player. And to hit on the other 3 real quick, Lou Nolan's story is remarkable. He was a day one employee. He's been with the organization since it was birthed. It's just remarkable what he has done. He is an icon. Paul Holmgren, I'm still amazed by his resume. He's obviously served the organization probably in every role you can think of. And to me, when you are in the high pressure roles that he was in, to be able to stay in one organization, stay there for that many years, 40 plus years he's been in the organization, that means you're doing something right.
And he only played, like it always astounds me because Paul's impact, and I don't want to gloss over Lou, but I just, when it comes to Paul with this, Paul's impact on the organization has spanned so many decades and so many positions, like you were saying, and he only played for 9 years, which is a long time to play, but it feels like he must have played for like 17 years and it wasn't. He played for 9 years or his entire, professional career was 9 years. And then just kind of wherever the organization needed him, he was like, I want to be there. And he was. And it's, I think, why when you talk to like Flyers alumni who are generations younger than him, they talk about Paul, and there's almost like, I don't want to say a father-like respect there, but there's a different level of respect for like, I think just like his dedication to the franchise. And that's such a general term, but it's because his dedication slots in a lot of areas. But yeah, Paul, it's always fascinating to me that it feels like Paul must have been like a 20-year player and then transitioned into doing what he did. And he wasn't, just wasn't.
Yeah. And just think with Paul, as far as Holmgren goes, how many guys in the history of sports have played, coached, and been the GM all for a franchise?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I have to think that it's a pretty short list.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think of Flyers, you think of Paul Holmgren. It's impressive. And then Bob Kelly, the other. I actually,
Jordan, when I saw Bob Kelly come out on this list, I'm like, wait a minute, Bob Kelly's not in the Flyers Hall of Fame already?
Right? Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
2-time champion. He's still serving the team within the community. Just a great guy.
And you'd be hard pressed to come to a Flyers game. Now, nobody's been to a game, and hardly anybody's been to a game in a couple of years now, but you'd be hard pressed to come to a Flyers game and not see Bob Kelly roaming around the building. Yeah. He's always around. He's always doing ambassador type things for this organization and charitable things.
Yeah.
And in addition to being a 2-time Stanley Cup winner.
Almost every game that because he used to stand right where I would stand when I did sideline hits, and I would always kind of just chat with him here and there when I could in commercial breaks when I didn't have a hit or something. And I think I want to say almost every single game where I would talk to him about like, what have you been doing? What are you up to today? He would always come from, well, we have this group in the building tonight, which was a charitable cause, whether it's, for military appreciation night, or it's, when it's like autism awareness night and they bring the kids in and they put like them up in Claude Giroux's box or whatever. Bob is the guy. Like Bob, and some of these young kids, like some of these are little kids who don't know who he is, and they just think he's this nice man. And they don't realize, like, go back and watch like the bully videos that are on YouTube and stuff. But Bob almost every single game, it seems like, is the welcome wagon, the host, the Flyers representative for these charitable causes. And he loves it. Like, he loves it. And I'm with you, Joe. When I saw him on the list of like nominees or the finalists, I was so confused. I'm like, how is Bob not already in it? But
yeah, and I would say the same goes for Lou Nolan. I didn't realize. I mean, Lou Nolan was a surprise that he wasn't there. I mean, I've been hearing Pico power play since I was a little kid coming to games.
Lou doesn't miss a day, too. That's the thing. Like Lou had to miss. Lou got real sick 2019, 2020 at some point, like, or he just wasn't feeling, he couldn't do it. Like, I think it was like a voice thing or something. I don't know. I don't want to talk too much on behalf of Lou in this particular situation because I don't genuinely know enough, But when Lou came back, I was like, Lou, it's so good to see you. It is so weird not to hear your voice. And he was like, I hate to miss a day. I hate it. I can't stand it. I have to be here. Like, Lou.
I can remember as a kid going to games with my dad, and when Lou takes his walk across the ice over to his box, and all the fans chant Lou. And I remember as a little kid thinking, what? I don't understand why they're booing. I thought they were booing the referees, which also happens. But my dad explained to me that they're chanting Lou. They do it every game when he walks over to his.
Bluest guys in the game too. Bob and Lou both. Not that it's important, but two of the bluest eyes you'll will see. The two of them. I wonder when Bob was playing, Bob looks at you and it feels like a White Walker, like from Game of Thrones. It's like looking at your eyes. It's so intimidating. But yeah, that's off topic, but just something to think about.
That's amazing.
The first game that I met Bob Kelly was the first game I was doing sideline. And I remember being like, I'm going to throw up right now. Like, because it's just these piercing eyes. And I'm like, hi, I'm Taryn, and, and you're shaking, and he's so nice. And, same for all of them, truthfully. But yeah. Bob and Lou are both. They're cool guys. Like,
Flyers.
This whole group of finalists would be just so fun to like just go grab dinner with.
Yeah.
Pick their brains. Yep. Bunch of good guys.
Yeah, I actually had the pleasure. It was unfortunate why I was talking to him, but it was 2016 when Bob Daly passed away, and I had just started writing about the team, and I had to write his obit for our website, and Tim Panaccio, my former colleague, a longtime Flyers reporter, gave me Bob Kelly's number and said, "Hey, call Bob. He will have great stuff on Bob Daly." So I called him, and I think my knee was shaking the entire time, but it was very surreal. And I was still younger at that time, didn't know the organization's history as much, but I felt in that conversation with Bob about Bob. I really learned what it meant to be a Flyer during that time, during that period, that era of Flyers hockey. That was pretty cool for me. So that was the story. That was the first time Taryn had ever met Bob Kelly. That was pretty cool. So God bless those who are voting. I can only imagine how tough it is. Taryn had to do that, but a true honor to vote on these 6. And it wouldn't surprise me if all 6 maybe get in one day. It really wouldn't. 6 figures with impressive resumes. Guys you think of when you think of the Flyers, for sure. But Taryn,
do you guys, before we wrap up, 2 of the guys we talked about were 2 different numbers for the Flyers? Can you get them?
No.
Well, I'll say it's Tocchet and Recchi. They both.
I was gonna say I couldn't remember what their numbers were if you asked me right now, but I know.
Oh, okay. The number 8 for Recchi is the more well known, but he wore number 11 for a small period of time.
Did Gagne ever change his number anywhere he went? It was always the same, right?
No, and number 12 has a prestigious history with the team because Tim Kerr was number 12.
Yeah.
In the 80s. So.
Do you guys want to hear a funny Simone Gagne story that doesn't actually involve Simone Gagne? Real quick before we wrap up.
Yeah.
So when I was a little kid, right, Flyers were like, I know people are like, oh yeah, I'm 4 for 4, whatever. I wouldn't even say my entire life that I was 4 for 4 because like when I was a little kid, my brother didn't play football, so I kind of got into football like towards the end of middle school, high school, whatever. Flyers were number 1 in our house. And I remember it was it would have been earlier in Simone Gagne because I would have grown up and wisened up to this. But when we were younger and Simone Gagne was with the Flyers, my dad the one day goes, there's a big article that they've been saying his name wrong all this time. It's Simon Gagne. And he told them it was Simone Gagne as a joke. And I was like, stop. And he was like, no, there's a whole newspaper article about it. And now the broadcasters won't change it because they're embarrassed. They've been saying Simon Gagne for so long, or Simone Gagne for so long, and it's actually Simon Gagne. And I was like, no way. But I was also a little kid, so it's like, your dad knows everything. And then now as an adult who knows Jim Jackson very well, and who knows really all the broadcasters quite well, and knows that it's Simone Gagne, I won't even joke with JJ that my dad said that because he is so on top of pronunciation and he takes it very seriously. Yeah. But there's probably like a week of my life where I was like, that's wild. This guy just told everybody's name was Simone Gagne, and it's really Simon Gagne. And I was like, I guess Gagne's not like a great last name. I'd probably pronounce it Gagne too. And I genuinely thought for probably like 7 days of my life that his name was Simon Gagne. So maybe like, it just was like when the list came out, it was such a recovered memory of my dad just sitting there. And I think my brother at some point knew that he was wrong, but I was the younger one. So my brother was like, no, Taryn, you don't know that. Like, you should know that. Like, if you want to be a sports reporter, you should know it's Simon Gagne. And I'm like, I knew that. Of course I knew that. And
that is actually a great joke to play on someone.
What?
That's a great joke to play on someone. Like, well done by your dad. That was pretty funny.
Well, and it's like, I don't even know if I would have been old enough to read a newspaper article. Like, I just remember being a little kid.
Yeah.
And just being like, Gagne. That's an unfortunate last name.
That's why he made it Gagne.
So that's my not so interesting Simone Gagne story, but
no, that's a good one.
Fond memories of, and it kind of, I think, is why that call where it's JJ, right? And it's like the Simone Gagne at the end of the game, overtime, game 7, right? And always makes me laugh extra because in my head it's Simon Gagne.
Yes. JJ called it wrong.
No, don't joke like that. He doesn't.
No, JJ, yeah.
But now Brad Marchand does do that to Jack Edwards in Boston, specifically to make him mad. So I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just Simone did not do that.
No. That is great. Well, so many memories about, honestly, all 6. You definitely cemented a legacy in one organization. Pretty cool. Always love the history. Love talking it with you guys. So Taryn Hatcher and Joe Fortes, thank you so much. As always, great talking about the current Flyers, the past. It's been real fun. Can't wait to chat with you next time.